Hi, guys, and welcome to another episode of Sharing Success. I'm so glad that you've joined me because in today's episode, I am talking to Lulu Essey. Lulu is absolutely incredible. She is an executive creative director. She's a podcast host of the Lulu Essey podcast, which I highly recommend you go and listen to, obviously, after you've listened to this one. And also, she is a passionate advocate and a passionate voice on the power of self love and mental fitness. Lulu is somebody who is living with bipolar, and she's been able to build a remarkable and successful career despite the challenges and all the stigma that surrounds mental health. And we talk about in this conversation self-love, not just in terms of the surface level things that we're so used to hearing and talking about, things like affirmations and all of those things, which are important, but we actually talk about self-love at a much deeper level and what it really looks like from a kind of personal perspective and from a societal perspective, and how we can use self-love really as a force and a power for creativity, alignment in our lives, and actually, to fuel our success and our kind of purpose. And we also talk about what it truly looks like to break down and to come back and rebuild and to come back stronger. So really fantastic conversation. I think you will learn and take away so much from it. Let's get into it. Hello, Lulu. Thank you so much for joining me and for joining Sharing Success.
Well, thank you for having me and for giving me this incredible opportunity.
Fantastic, fantastic. So you are an executive creative director. So you've obviously climbed the ranks and had a very illustrious and kind of successful career. You're
Yeah.
also the host of the Lulu Essey podcast. And you're also, and this is what we'll be talking about today, on a huge mission to really talk about self-love and break the barrier that we have in terms of self-love and to really redefine what people understand self-love to be. So we'll be talking about self-love today, and super excited to hear about how you came to be doing this work and educating us, I think, on this topic, and so that we can go away a lot more kind of in the know about what self-love is all about.
Amazing. Amazing. I'm very excited. There's so much rich kind of content to dive into. So I'll take your lead.
Fantastic. So first things first, I think let's redefine what self-love actually means, because I think I have a definition, other people have a definition, but it may not be the right definition. So in terms of self-love, what do you think people, firstly, how do you define self-love? And what do you think people get wrong when it comes to self-love?
Okay, so I define self-love as the ability to be compassionate, kind, caring, and understanding to ourselves first and foremost. I define it as seeking our validation and our worth internally and not externally. And that's a really tough one, especially today with social media, and especially that everything that we do is measured. There's metrics around everything. And it's seeing the value of those metrics, but not attaching your worth to those metrics because that is external. That can change in a heartbeat. And with business as well, your business success, your revenue, your client base can fluctuate. Your self worth, which is built on self love, never fluctuates. It just is. So it's recognizing that. And in terms of what and the other thing that's really important to say about self love, it is a daily practice. It is not something you get a graduation certificate and think, okay, I've aced it. It is something, some days you're really good at practicing self love, and other days it's just really hard. But it's that willingness to do the inner work. And that's where I think introverts have a real advantage because we're naturally more comfortable going inward. I think you asked me what people get it wrong about self love. I think people, what they miss is that self love is the missing infrastructure for the success that we want. They see self love and outwardly success and accomplishments and goals as completely separate. But self love is the foundation that's going to support all of that. So I'm not living in la la land. Well, I do live there sometimes, but I get that real world success is necessary, that you want to meet your revenue goals, you want to meet your KPIs, you want to do all of that. So I'm not discounting the importance of that. But I'm saying when you come from a foundation of self love, it makes that more sustainable and it makes it more achievable. The other thing I think people get wrong is they confuse self love with self acceptance. And self acceptance is a very important step along the journey. But I always think of it in terms of I can accept things about my life and about other people, but I don't need to love them.
So
So
true.
there's a really big difference there between self-acceptance and self-love. And the elephant in the room is that there is this cringe factor, this repellent factor that's attached to self-love. People hear the word and they immediately just feel repelled by it, and they cringe at the thought of it. They don't want to talk about it. It makes them uncomfortable. And we can unpack that, but I think that's a combination of cultural conditioning, and it's so much easier to look outside of yourself than to go inside and do the inner work, which is often really uncomfortable
So
initially.
true. Wow. I mean, where do I even start with what you've said? As you said, there's so much to unpack. And you're
Yes.
right, our attitudes and cultural perspectives on self-love definitely has a huge impact, and we'll definitely go on to kind of talk about that. Why do you think it is then that we feel probably comfortable to talk about self-loathing or, self-hate and all these sorts of things, and so uncomfortable to talk about self-love? What do you think kind of drives that?
I think it's a number of things. I think because we've been taught culturally, it is changing, which is a good thing. But culturally, we've been taught to put others' needs before our own, and that what other people think is deeply, deeply important to us, and that's how we gauge our self worth. And I also think that a there's a tendency to think of it as an indulgence. I don't have time for self-love. I'm busy trying to put food on the table. Self-love is something wealthy people do. So I think there's a lot of misconception around it. And something I want to make clear is that I'm not saying that we don't have to care about what other people think. We are beings, we're wired for connection. So, what other people think is profoundly meaningful to me personally, but it's not the driving force. And I don't look to that for my validation. And I don't get it right all the time. When I see my views drop and I see my numbers drop, I have a moment of crisis. The difference is that with the techniques that I've learned and that I apply, I don't stay stuck there. I know how to move through it. And it's also about not having the judgment towards yourself when you stumble or when you fall. It's finding that compassion.
Thank you so much. I think obviously you've had a journey to kind of arriving here. What have
Yes.
been some of the kind of key moments or moments, you don't have to be key moments, but what have been some moments where you realized that you really had to put self-love front and center and had to prioritize it, and that it wasn't some indulgence, but something actually very critical to your success?
Sure. So I think this journey has been around, I was going to say a 30-year journey, and that's what I've been saying consistently, but actually, it started from childhood. I was the kind of child who, just because of circumstances, and many of us have had traumatic childhoods, but I had a non existent self worth. Actually, I had quite the opposite. There was deep self hatred. And I was diagnosed with severe bipolar and psychosis when I was in my early 20s. And one of the manifestations of that was I engaged in self harm. So I have a deep, I'm getting goosebumps as I say that. I have a deep empathy for people who feel more deeper than self-loathing. Self-hatred is pretty significant. And so moving from self-harm to self-love was a journey. It didn't happen overnight, and I didn't even consciously realize at a moment in time that self-love was the solution. It was a continuation of situations that I was in, bad relationships that I was in, relapses that I was having. I was institutionalized a few times. That it started to uncover for me and unfold for me until a point that I could articulate it. And that was, I think, when I was living in Hong Kong, where I came to the US in 2020, and I had been living in Hong Kong for 19 years before I left. And I hadn't engaged in self harm for many, many years. And something happened, and I did that. And this time it was different because after the act, I felt such a profound compassion for myself. And I thought, you deserve better than this. You deserve more than this. And wasn't able to articulate what the answer was, but I started to really go inside. Now, I had been in therapy for years, and I'm very open to alternative approaches and alternative modalities. So it's not like the inner work began then. The inner work began years ago, but somehow there was a piece that still needed to be unlocked. So, very briefly, that's how I came to understand that the missing piece for me was self-love, and it's been a kind of like an unfolding, a becoming, an expansion that's happened since that moment. And I've had huge resistance to this concept, in terms of being a thought leader, in terms of being a speaker. I've been told, what the F is that? Like, how do I sell that? How do I market that? People are not interested in that. Talk to me about burnout. Talk to me about the 7 steps to achieve your goals. Don't talk to me about self-love. So, and I've just kind of, and it's quiet. And that's where I feel there's such alignment with your work, is that there's this quiet power. Self-love is not loud and noisy. It's an inward journey, and I think it's revolutionary.
I've
And
just got
people
goosebumps.
see it as repellent, and I see it as revolutionary.
I love that. Thank you so much for being so open. And that's something that we'll definitely go on to kind of explore more and learn more about later on. From what you've said, you actually touched on one of the things I was going to ask you quite beautifully, which is that do you feel that self love is something that is a skill to be learned, or it's something that is within all of us inherently and naturally, that it's become so covered up with all of the societal things that you kind of talked about earlier?
I think honestly, it's a bit of both.
Mm.
I think, you watch really young children and you learn a lot. They don't criticize themselves. They fall, they get up. They don't say, what an idiot, I fell. They just try again. So I think it is inherent in all of us to have that love for ourselves. But then I think what happens is, as we live life, there's all this cultural conditioning and all the noise from the external world, that it gets so buried that to access it is where the skill comes, and to uncover it. So it is a little bit of both. And there are skills and techniques that you can learn to help you uncover it. I think one of the most important things that I like to say to people is, this is your unique path. So I can give you guidelines on how to get there, but you have to find the way for yourself, the way that's meaningful to you, not to me.
But Lulu, where are my 7 steps?
I do have frameworks. I have
Love
frameworks.
it.
I have the love framework, and I have the whole framework that people can use as kind of, they can use them as pointers and things to help them. But no, I do not follow rules, and I don't have the 5 steps to success.
I love
That's,
it.
you know what, that's the work, and I don't want to undervalue anyone's work. That's the work for other people who teach that better. That's not what I am here to do or to teach.
I love that. So I listened to your podcast. I've been listening. I'm loving it, by the way. So everybody, you need to get out there and start listening to Lulu Essey podcast. So fascinating because you delve into this topic of self-love. But one of the things that kind of I've been learning from it is about self-love, naturally mental fitness. So tell us about mental fitness and how it kind of connects with self-love. Kind of what are the links?
Okay, so for me, mental health has been such it's an everyday reality for me, my mental health and managing my bipolar and not letting that hold me back. And I first came across the term mental fitness from Simon Sinek. Now, I don't know if he was the originator of the term, but I give credit where credit is due. So that's where I came across the word. And I much prefer it to mental health because it it speaks to something that you've got to continuously work at. There's no end point when it comes to mental fitness. It's again like self-love, it's a daily practice. So the two for me are very intertwined. And it's how to look at your and manage your mental health, your mental fitness on a daily basis, because you don't have to have a diagnosed mental illness to struggle with your mental health and to struggle with depression and anxiety and self-loathing and emotional overwhelm. And so within that, I do want to be very clear, and I always am, that I'm not a clinician. I come from it from a point of view of personal experience, in dealing with my own trauma and my own journey through what I call mental fitness. And I want to make it feel attainable to people and doable. Not like circumstances have to be perfect, because life will not stop so that you can get your house in order. Like shit keeps coming at you from all directions. So it's how do you manage the chaos of everyday life and still take care of your mental fitness?
How that is perfect segue to kind of the next thing that I really wanted to delve into with you, which is the fact that we've talked about, your career and the fact that you're a creative executive director, and the fact that, you've been open about your bipolar disorder. How have you been able to show up fully, which you clearly have done in order to build this successful career in those kind of great times, but also during those challenging times? How have you been able to kind of manage that?
Well, I can tell you it's been a journey, and it's been really, really hard. And I kept it very secret for a big portion of my career because I felt that I didn't trust myself enough. And I thought if people knew, they wouldn't trust me with their projects. They'd be thinking, oh my God, is she going to have a manic episode? Is she going to have a depressive episode? So it took me a long time to build that confidence. And it was when I came to the US, really, that I fully opened about being a bipolar. And I can tell you, I was like wondering, am I committing career suicide here? Because, it was very scary, because there's never a guarantee of how people will receive the information. But I think it's become, I now can draw on it as a power rather than kind of like a handicap. So it's been a journey to get there. It wasn't a light bulb moment where I suddenly decided, okay, now I'm ready to tell the world. It's particularly challenging during the hard times. So in May of this year, I lost my full-time role as an executive creative director. I'm still very active and freelancing, and that happened to coincide with a relapse. And I've had many bumps in the road, but I haven't had a full-blown relapse for over a decade. So it was hard. And it was soul destroying. And I felt such profound shame and such a sense of failure that I was in this place again. But I was able to move through it. And the first point, I think, before you can move through anything, there's a point of awareness and then acceptance without judgment. And that's really hard, not to have that judgment towards yourself and not to feel like I failed because I've relapsed. Rather, I failed because I'm human, you know. So it's been an unfolding, and now I'm really comfortable in my own skin, and I talk about it not for sympathy. I talk about it because hopefully that will give other people the space to talk about it and feel it's not just me, and to remove the secrecy around it, you know. And it's also not about trauma dumping or trauma tourism, you know. So it's what's appropriate in the moment for whoever you happen to be working with or speaking to at that particular time.
Thank you so much for being so open about that. I really appreciate it. And, just for anybody, for our listeners, the reason I ask these questions is exactly what you said, because, mental fitness, mental health, these are topics that are so close to my heart because they've touched my family so, so closely. My brother struggled with his mental health for such a long time. And I think that it's really important to have people talking about this because for me, I think it's important that we normalize it the way that people talk about physical fitness all the time. There's nothing strange about it. You just talk about it. And mental fitness, mental health is just, it's exactly the same thing. It's just the same. But we're not quite there yet. So I think it is important to talk about it. And also, I think for somebody who has navigated it or is navigating it so beautifully and able to talk about it and achieving the things you're achieving, for people, as you say, who might be going through one of those tough moments, to be able to hear this and to see you and to think, oh, okay, you've been through this darkness and here you are, and I'm going to be okay. Because I think sometimes that can just be that kind of port in the storm or that light or, whatever analogy works. But I think that's the reason it's so important to kind of bring these conversations to light. In terms of organizational perspective, what would you want leaders out there to know and understand, and not just leaders, actually, to be honest, leaders and colleagues and everybody in the workplace, peers, to understand about people who have got any kind of condition in terms of mental fitness, in terms of mental health?
I think there's for leaders, it's to remove the judgment and see it as, this is somebody who can bring something unique to my team. This is somebody who can bring a completely different perspective, and not to have fear around, are they going to break down? Are they going to do, and open the conversation, bring it into the light, and ask the person, what does support look like for you? So don't make assumptions about the person on your team who has a mental health struggle or issue. Speak to them openly, but really be willing to listen to what they're telling you, not to what the voice in your head is saying. And I think, and this brings us back to the point of leaders who come from a position of authenticity and who have done the inner work are so much more effective in the workplace. They are so much more emotionally resilient, and they can show up for themselves and their teams in a much more powerful way, because you're going to lose clients. There are going to be jobs that are not as successful as you want to be. So where's that emotional resilience going to come from? It comes from one place, I think, and that's inside. So I think this concept of self-love there's a very strong connection to leadership. It's not about the headline on your LinkedIn bio. It's about your authentic power and your authentic leadership that comes from inside. And it doesn't have to be noisy.
Love that. I love that. Refocusing on the self love piece, you touched on the topic of bouncing back and resilience. So, for everybody listening, how does developing a greater sense of self-love, how does that impact the resilience aspect and kind of bouncing back, which I think we all instinctively seem to understand that, okay, we need to be able to bounce back and we need to be resilient, but how does one affect the other?
Okay, so I love that you've asked this question because there is also this perception around bouncing back needing to happen on a timeline. Okay, I need to bounce back. I'll give myself 24 hours or 48 hours. It has its own timeline. But the willingness to be uncomfortable and to say, this sucks. I feel awful. I'm in a dark place. And it comes back to what I was saying about acceptance and awareness. So it's also letting it be, just letting it be for a moment. We tend to only want the good times and not the dark times. But having emotional resilience allows you not to stay stuck. And that's where self love is such a powerful tool, because you will have the dark times, you will hit the decks, but it's not staying stuck there. And it's not staying stuck in your story as well. And that's another thing I wanted to touch on is when people have had traumatic events or a diagnosis, or there is a tendency sometimes to allow that narrative to define who you are. That narrative is just a part of, of who you are, and let it expand you, not restrict you. Because we also don't want to protect ourselves from the bad times, Antoinette. We want to experience all of life. We think we only want the good times, but that's where emotional resilience comes in. Is I can handle it's being able to say, I can handle this. I might not know how to, but I can take one small step forward in the right direction. And that step can be minuscule. Don't judge the size of that step. That step could be opening your curtains and letting some light in. There's not a measure in terms of how big or how little the step. You do what you can where you're at. The other thing in terms of how it impacts emotional resilience is you learn not to abandon yourself. And that is really powerful, because when we're in those dark periods of our lives, we tend to abandon ourselves. And when you learn to not abandon yourself, firstly, you move through those dark times with more ease. You learn to give yourself more grace, but then you also don't abandon others. So this is not just about me. This is about me. It's about my relationships. It's about my community. And it's about the impact that I can have. And I'll say it, on a global scale.
Tell me more about the abandoning yourself piece, because I know what I kind of conjured up when you said that phrase, but what do you mean specifically around kind of when you say you don't abandon yourself?
So not abandoning yourself means not giving up on yourself,
Right.
not saying I'm a failure and
Mm-mm.
I'm doomed to be a failure and this is who I am and I don't have what it takes. That is what abandonment looks like. You would never abandon a child in need, but we are so quick to abandon ourselves and to think that we're less than, we're not worthy, when every time you say or think I'm not enough, that's a small moment of abandoning yourself. And there will be times when it happens. Again, I'm not after perfection here. I don't believe in it. I've looked for it everywhere. It doesn't exist. But it's recognizing those moments and doing what you can so that you don't abandon yourself. And just this thing of abandoning ourselves is really big for me, because it's like giving up. Like this is what I'm cut out for. This is as good as it gets, So that's what it means for me. And I'll tell you, in this last relapse that I had, I found myself quite like, I didn't think about this as a process or a technique, But I found myself crying in the shower. It's a wonderful place to cry in
It
the
is.
shower. Somehow it feels so cathartic. And I'd place my hand on my chest and I would just say, I will not abandon you. And I just kept saying that over and over. And I didn't quite know what the actions were that I needed to follow that phrase, but I just kept soothing myself and saying, I will not abandon you. So I think there's something really powerful when we are no longer willing to abandon ourselves.
I love that. Thank you so much for that. That's definitely something that people can start to implement because you're right. And when, as you started to describe it, it made sense. But it was, yeah, it was, I kind of thought, abandon yourself. What do you mean by that? But yeah, so true. And it is such an easy rabbit hole to go down, isn't it?
You're
It's
complete.
so easy to kind of go down that rabbit hole, especially as you say, because we're so bombarded with what appears to be perfection all the time. So when things are breaking down around you in your own world, it's very easy to kind of jump onto that bandwagon of yes, this is me now. Yeah.
Completely. I mean, we open up our social media
Oh,
and everyone's acing it. Everyone's a multi-million dollar success overnight because they followed these particular 10 steps. And that leaves you feeling like, what is wrong with me? Why am I not getting this right? But you don't see the full picture because that is being perfectly polished for social media. And that's why my podcast is my quiet rebellion against that perfection because it's unedited. And sometimes that's scary because I'll bomb sometimes and I'll say something. I mean, I research my episodes, I script them, but things can still go wrong. But if I'm asking people to show up authentically, I need to be willing to do that myself.
love that. Thank you so much. In terms of, I know this isn't about any kind of specific steps, but you talked about the fact that self-love is it's a daily practice. It's an ongoing, continual thing. So for those of us who, or for people who may not be doing anything towards this or may not know where do I start, can you give us a few things, ideas, pointers, anything that you would say, okay, if you're going to start and commit to, okay, I actually want to really start working on this self-love piece because it is, and I hope everyone's getting this, it's so critical and foundational to everything else going well. How can we start? What sorts of things can we start to do or put in place?
Oh, I'd love the opportunity to share something. So I've got two really powerful frameworks. I've got many, but I think let's start with what I call the love framework because that's a really easy place to start. And I always believe that tools need to work where you are and with what you have. So if you're in a dark place, you have no money, you have no job, I want to be able to offer people tools that they can use at that moment in time. So the LOV framework, it's an acronym, and the L stands for listen to your inner voice. And it's like we are already listeners, but are we listening to ourselves? And when I say listen to the inner voice, listen to what the conversation that you're having with yourself, listening to that inner critic, I want to draw an important distinction. Listening is the practice itself. It's not judgment. It's not assessment. It's not saying, oh my God, that stinks. It's just the willingness to listen and become familiar with the sound of that voice that is inside. Then the O of love is own your worth. Your worth is because it is. It is not dependent on external validation. It is not dependent on your social media numbers or followers or metrics. And it's also not dependent on I will matter when, or I will be enough when I get the promotion, when I lose the weight, when I pay off my debts, when I have 100,000 followers. It's own your worth today with the debt, with the lack of followers. And I'm not saying give up on your goals. I call it the, grounded and still reaching for more. So that's what the O stands for, own your worth. Then V means value your journey. it's so easy for us to value everybody else's journey. Oh, how amazing. They did this and they did that and they came through this. But what about your own journey? And valuing the messy parts of it, the hard parts of it, all of it, because it got you to where you are today. And there's huge power in valuing our unique path and our unique journey. It's how we all want to be like everybody else, and there's so much comparison. So that's what the V is about. It's in terms of your language, and Antoinette, it's that quiet growth. It's that quiet leadership, that quiet journey on the inside, especially for introverts. So it's valuing that. And then the E, I love the E because it stands for embrace imperfect action. You know, we all want to wait until everything's lined up and then we'll do the thing that scares us. Then we'll start the business. Then I say, bugger that. Do what you can with where you are and with what you have. You know, starting is better than kind of, you know, holding back until you think you've got all the pieces in place and you've done all the research and you've, you know, done all the kind of market research. That there is value in that, but it's going to keep you stuck. So like with my podcast,
Love it.
it was such an imperfect start. You know, I'm going to be shortly, I'm going to be 50 episodes in. I still don't have music at the beginning of my podcast, but I didn't want that to stop me. You know, there's things that I still want to improve. I have a weekly newsletter, and I am not in a position where I can have like a proper robust email platform like Kajabi or ConvertKit or whatever it is. I have too many things that I'm focused on right now, but I still send out the newsletter manually from my Outlook. You know, I have no clue. I don't have the stats to show me what my open rate is and what my read rate is, what my retention rate is, but I show up.
I love
It's
that.
imperfect, but I show up because that's what I'm able to do right now. Do I want it to be better? Absolutely. You know, and do I see it being better in the future? Sense. But right now, I'm doing what I can.
Thank you so much. I absolutely love that. So many things came to mind. Firstly, the thing about the no music. Honestly, after listening to a number of your episodes, I was like, I love it. I don't know that you need the music. It's almost like that is your signature. Having just you starting the show. That's there's no need for music. It's a distraction. And also, I think this thing you said about the sending the emails, that's so powerful for people to hear this. You know, whether it's somebody who's started and, you know, as you say, they're kind of struggling to kind of do this or that because they're like, oh, I need to get this tool or I need to research that or I need to figure out how to use that technology. And you're saying, well, actually, just get your email going and send the email, which so powerful because the person who's reading it at the end of that kind of send, they won't be thinking, well, how did you send this to me? You know, did you send this through this specific provider or they'll be
Yeah.
reading the quality and kind of the value that you're sending them.
And you know, I look at people that I admire and people that serve as role models, and their newsletters have beautifully positioned imagery and photographs, and I aspire to that. But right now, today, the 17th of September 2025, that's not a reality. But that doesn't mean I can't have a newsletter.
Always remember, everybody, every master was once a disaster. That's what I absolutely,
That I love
that's one of
that.
my favorites. It's my mantra.
I think we swing between the two. Like
That's true.
we're not always masters and we're not always disasters. We're somewhere on that continuum, you know.
Definitely, definitely. That's so true, isn't it? It's like you're not, you no, there is no arrival, isn't it? I think that's the thing. There isn't any arrival. It's like the same with any work, any business, any kind of development, and even the inner work. You know, once you peel this layer, there's another layer, and another one, and another one. So it will never end.
And I love to tell people the world needs your humanity. not your perfection. And humanity is what connects us. And connection to self allows us to connect to others. And that's where it's at for me. You know, it is about connection. But I think, not but, and I think powerful connection comes from when we are fully connected to who we are. You know, so and you know, if you'll allow me, because your whole platform is around success, I intimated this earlier, but I don't want people to see self-love and worldly success. Now when I say worldly success, I mean like financial success and launching that book and, you know, getting that fame if that's what you want. Or they're not separate, the one supports the other, but people kind of, they separate them and they think, okay, I'm going to work on the strategies, I'm going to work on the success, I'm going to work on all of that, and then I'll come back to the self-love. Why can't we do the two at the same time? It doesn't have to be either or.
That's so important. And I'm glad you raised that because I feel like, is it time for rebrand? Because the thing is, it's She Owns Success because I'm all about women doing amazing things, right? But the thing is, and this is something that I've always believed this, but even more so now as I've been on my own journey, which is that success is actually an inside out journey. Because as we've talked about, firstly, if you're out here chasing this success, you can be succeeding in something. There's plenty of people who actually are succeeding. When you talk to them, they don't feel like they are. They're like, oh, they're still not seeing themselves as succeeding or successful. And that's because it's that inner peace. They haven't looked at that inner peace. They don't have that self-love. They don't feel that sense of self-worth. They're still chasing something. There's plenty of people in those positions. And I've interviewed people who have done exactly that. They've gone through and actually to the other side where they had all that success, which you just talked about, kind of the money, the this, the career. They were miserable. And something happened. And then suddenly they realized, I need to come back to myself. I need to actually come back to who on earth am I? What on earth do I actually want? And what is my version of success? So perhaps it's, we need to think about success as what is success to you and what is your version of success versus success that, everyone expects to see. And also success, as I keep saying, I think I definitely want to drive that message a lot more, which is it's an inside out piece because this inner work, it's the thing that really impacts everything. Definitely.
Completely. And that's where I said to you in the beginning, I find such alignment with what you do with your work and what I do with my work, because I call it an inside job. And the thing about it is money is transitory. The stock market can crash, something can happen, you can lose the money, you can lose the client, it's not permanent. But the success from the inside is. And I want to be very clear. Do I want more money? Absolutely. Do I want more real world success? Absolutely. I am in a place where I'm able to feel appreciation and joy for where I'm at. And at the same time, like I said, reach for more. I'm not waiting to be enough.
Yes. Yes. And to actually say one final thing about this point we're talking about, this inside out success, as I have started to kind of delve a little bit more deeply into this world of the spiritual side of things and money mindset. Now, I've interviewed a number of people about money mindset. Then you start to realize even this seeming outside success, it's actually internal. It's all in here because if your sense of self-worth or what you deserve, that's a powerful and very kind of loaded word, is down here somewhere. If you think I'm not worthy of any of these things, how can you possibly receive those things and attract those things into your life? So actually, perhaps it's more linked than perhaps we're even alluding to here. It is all inside, all of it.
It is. And that self-worth and
Mm.
that feeling of being enough and that I deserve this is so powerful, because the world will reflect
Yeah.
back to you what you believe to be true about yourself. The universe does not give you what you want, it gives you who you are. Those are not my words. I heard that somewhere, and it just resonated so powerfully with me. And it's also, I sometimes look at that the universe gives us who we are, and I think, oi, oi, I could be better.
Yeah.
Why am I still not, and it's just in that moment, it's just letting go. That's another powerful thing. Just let go of all of that. Let go of, and that for me is a big lesson, to let go of the outcomes,
Mm,
to stay very focused on what the goal is, but let go. That is a skill. That is not something you develop overnight, and that's where the practice comes in. But people are not willing to do the work. Antoinette, I feel like they want the quick fix. They want the 30-day program that's going to transform your life. And then after the 30 days, and then when you look in the mirror,
yes,
you
so
you
true.
you know, and some days you don't feel like doing the work. It's like, bugger this. It's too hard.
So true. So
Do
true.
it anyway.
So that is so, so true and so powerful. And I guess as we kind of draw towards the latter part of the interview, in terms of self love, then, what do you want people to know about self love? If kind of people go away remembering just one or two things about self love and why it's so important and critical, what would those one or two things be?
I would love people to visualize it as infrastructure, as almost like the skeleton, our muscles and our beautiful organs. And if we didn't have our skeletal system, they just fall to the ground. So it is the infrastructure, it is the foundation of all of the things that we want. There are many other things, but for me it is the foundational thing. And it is within every one of us, but it's buried underneath all that self-worthing, that not enoughness, that I don't deserve this, but it is there. And it's just, be willing, be open. You can't get this wrong, because there's so many paths to self-love, and let it meet you where you're at in your life. And don't think you can go from self-loathing
Mm,
to self-love overnight. I don't That's a myth. It is a journey. And it is so worth it. There are so many gifts along the way. And some days you'll feel like you're just in your stride, and you're flowing. And other days you'll feel like, I'm going backwards. That doesn't mean you're failing. It means you're human. So remove the judgment from yourself, and just be willing to be uncomfortable. you know and I say, like, invite the self-loathing, invite it in. It's got something to say to you. Say, come, let's have a cup of tea, let's talk about what you have to tell me, or the fear, or the self-doubt, or the I'm not enough. Listen to what it has to say, acknowledge it, honor it, and then say, it's time to go. It's not staying stuck. And how quickly or how slowly we move is also very tricky. Like, don't judge the speed of the journey you know
so true. How do you feel or think that organizations would change, firstly, if more leaders would did this inner work and showed up from a place of self-love? And how do you feel, or what do you think would change in kind of society if we all did this work and showed up more from a place of self-love?
Okay. Well, I love giving people a visual,
Mm,
because I think it's so powerful and it goes beyond words. When you throw a stone into a still pond, you see the ripples. It's undeniable. And that's what happens when you build from a foundation of self love. It ripples out into the person next to you, and then the person next to them. And so firstly, it has a very, very powerful ripple effect. Secondly, it gives you as a leader emotional resilience to lead your team through those difficult times. And also, now we're dealing with AI, which we haven't even touched on.
We haven't.
And it's like AI is telling us, sort of contributing to that feeling of, I'm not good enough, I'm not smart enough, I should know more. So, building from this inner foundation is going to better prepare you for that. I'm an AI optimist. I'm not a tech gloom and doom person, but it can be a very scary it's a scary landscape because none of us can predict what it's going to look like. We can make an informed guess, but when you secure inside, you can better handle. You don't become immune to things that go wrong. You feel them more deeply, but you're more resilient and you can move through them and not stay stuck. So I think there's a lot for leaders and organizations to adopt through the process of doing the inner work. And also, then you let go of this thing of, because I'm a leader, I have to have the loudest voice, be the first one to speak, have the best opinion, have the best ideas. No, because you give space for other people to be who they are as well, because you're secure in yourself. The ego is kept in check.
I love that so much. You said that thing about security and being secure in yourself. And that's such a powerful phrase, even because it conjures up this feeling of like, yes, it's okay. If I didn't come up with the best, this, that, and the other, it's actually absolutely fine. And actually, how much nicer for your team if they can come up with those great things and it's not always you. Definitely.
Completely. And then you can celebrate them and celebrate their success, and I think as a leader, and now we're going into other territory, but to provide the space and the expansiveness for other people to shine is, for me, that's such a privilege as a leader.
So true.
But if I'm constantly feeling like I have to prove myself, then I'm not going to be able to to give them the space to do that.
Love that. Love that. Very finally, then, you've given us so much kind of food for thought and so many things that we can take away. And your framework, the love framework, I love that. Definitely be kind of making sure that everybody remembers that one. One of the things that we touched on very briefly, we've talked about introverts. And this is because, one of the groups of people that's very dear to my heart because I am an introvert. The thing about kind of self-love and introversion, the reason I raise it is because I think you talked about listen to yourself and listening to your inner voice. Firstly, there's, what is your inner voice saying? But there's also tuning into other people. And I find that as someone who is so attuned to other people, it's so easy to get drawn into what's going on with other people, which you said before. I think we're taught that you need to be concerned about how the people are feeling, what other people are thinking, all of those things. But it can be draining. It can suck you in. It can take it all away from you. So how do you balance, I guess what I'm saying is, as an introvert or a highly sensitive person, or, somebody who's just very in tune to people's feelings, if you don't like those terms, introvert or highly sensitive, how do you balance self-love, which is saying, okay, you need to tune in, with the fact that you've got those things at play as well?
I think you balance it by starting internally. They tell us, and we never question it, when you get on an aeroplane, they tell you very clearly, put your own oxygen mask on first and then help others. So I see it as the same way. It's not about, there's a kind of a narrative around like, I don't give a shit about what people think. That's not what self-love is about, because like I said, our brains are wired for connection, but it's making sure that my cup is full, I'm stable, I'm coming from a loving place towards and a secure place towards myself, because then it allows me to give so much more to others and to be truly there for them. and also to be able to discern what is mine and what is theirs, and not to feel like I need to fix them, because that's the other thing that is very big for me.
Yeah.
Nobody's fixed. Sorry, nobody's broken. I beg your pardon. They don't need fixing. But there's this tendency to, oh, if somebody's asking for my help, they want me to fix them. Just hold them in their pain. Just be there for them. Your job is not to fix anyone. They are not broken. They may have lost their way. They may be in pain. But sometimes the best thing we can do for others is just allow them the space to be who they need to be in that moment and not feel like we have to fix them, because they pick it up as well and they feel that pressure from us, like I need to make you better. You don't. So I got a bit sidetracked there, but I hope I got to the core of your question.
No, you definitely did. Definitely did. And thank you
Start
so much.
in and then go out. And if you allow me, because I know we're coming to the end, the one thing that also makes self-love repellent to people and kind of a bit cringe is because they think these things are simple. Doesn't mean they're easy, but they're not complicated strategies that you need a special degree for. They're hard, but they're not difficult. And we have a tendency, I think, in today's culture to reject things that seem too simple on the surface. Oh, well, if it's that simple, it can't really make a difference. Well, firstly, it's simple and it's not. That's the ultimate irony. And yes, it will make a difference if you're willing to do the work.
I love that so much. That's so true, though, isn't it? I guess if you think about everything on the planet, I feel is very inverse in that it's often the opposite of what you think. So we think we need all these complex and complicated and multifaceted strategies. And actually, it's like the thing that's going to sort out your issue is the simplest solution, but you're ignoring that. Don't
Completely.
overcomplicate it. I need to tell this to myself. That's why I'm reiterating it for myself.
And that's where the imperfect action comes in. Get the simple things right, and then you can add on all
Mm.
the other stuff. And again, it's not an all or nothing or an either or approach, but it's where what is the starting point? And when you're overwhelmed and when you're down, you can't start with a complicated strategy, but you can start with a tiny step.
Well, it's been such an interesting and powerful conversation. Thank you so much, Lulu. I think we've given us a lot to think about. You've given us the love framework that was so kindly shared with us, and I think really helped us to connect kind of this key piece of self-love and how that can help us to propel to the things that we outwardly want to achieve. Because honestly, it's so true, and you're so right. It is, there is no getting away from it. It will always kind of be the thing that's probably your limiting factor if you don't address it. So thank you. It's been fantastic to have you on. If people want to know more, if they want to find out about work, if they want to work with you, where's the best place to kind of get in contact with you and how can they find you?
Well, my podcast is available on all the major platforms. I also have a YouTube channel. I'm on most social media platforms, or you can just simply send me an email at lulu@luluessey.com. Very ESSEY. And I welcome connection. It's one of the gifts of this work is that we get to connect. And please, give the podcast a listen and see if it resonates. I always say, take what works, leave the rest.
I will second that. Definitely give it a listen because I'm listening and I'll be continuing to listen because it's really interesting conversations around topics like this, but even more of them and even deeper, delving into some other areas that we haven't touched on here at all. So definitely do give it a listen. It's been fantastic to have you on. I really, really appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you for the amazing opportunity. I've really enjoyed this conversation. I feel like every cell in my body is like buzzing in such a great way.
Thank you so much to Lulu for such a brave and open and honest discussion that is much needed about self-love, about mental fitness, about resilience. I think Lulu's journey with bipolar, living with bipolar, and kind of reaching such a high level of success in her career is such a wonderful reminder that things are possible if we kind of do the work within. And also, I think this conversation hopefully reminds you that self-love is not a luxury, it's not fluff, it's actually the work, the inner work that we need to do that really is the foundation that makes everything else possible. If you found this conversation helpful, please do subscribe and join us again.